found out something very unsettling about Harry. He gambles.
What do you mean he gambles?
He plays craps in the back room of a private club. I mean, you know, yo 11, come on, little Joe. Snake eyes, hard way 8s. That's how it goes. He loses a lot of money.
You had no idea?
No, I didn't.
Welcome to the Crap Vegas podcast.
Vegas, here we come.
Vegas!
Here are your hosts, Chris and Josh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Crap Vegas podcast. I am Chris, he is Josh. And Josh, how are you doing this wonderful afternoon?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's 85 degrees here and beautiful afternoon, and it's Tuesday, and I think we've settled into a normal recording pattern. How about you?
Yeah, I kind of like this. We got this down now. We record on Tuesdays, and that gives us 5 days to fix all the mistakes, the technical glitches, and just get way ahead of the game. And it works so much better than trying to cram it in at the end of the week. But no, this is good. The people can actually rely on us to put something out every second Sunday now, and we will gladly screw that up probably in the next month somehow.
That's right. But we do have our next recording we've got already planned, and Chris and I will each have trips under our belt by then that we'll get to talk about on the next show. So we're excited about that.
I mean, yeah, we're almost professional here. I mean, we actually have things calendared out for a couple months right now. So we don't want to get too far ahead of us, but we're happy with the direction things are going. So if you do want to get in touch with us, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can reach us via email at podcast@crapvegas.com. You can message us on our new forums on the website. That's crapvegas.com/boards. B-O-A-R-D-S is what I'm trying to spell here. And I don't know why that was so difficult.
And as Chris is saying that, I've actually logged into the forums and contributed. So I'm proud of myself for that.
Perfect work. Yeah. I mean, Josh is actually being active in something. So this is terrific. But
I've answered email that comes into podcast at crapvegas.com.
I mean, I might as well just take over the back end stuff and just let you be front facing on everything from now on. You truly are our customer support guru here.
I'll just run the show.
Okay. And the final way you can reach us is always on Twitter. That's by far the easiest. He's at Vegas Duffy. I'm at Small Whale 13. Or we do have a new at Crap Vegas Twitter account that we both try to hop on as much as we can. We're going to try to keep more of the show information on that account and just use our normal accounts for more personal stuff or just responding to people. But that's a good thing to follow if you haven't done so already. You don't want to miss out on any, promos for the website, any new content that came out that isn't podcast related. We'll try to make sure that's always posted on there. So give at Crap Vegas a follow if you can.
Absolutely. We're trying. One of the challenges for people that are on Twitter, you might see people that have a podcast and then their personal handle, and I'm trying at least not to post the same thing on both and have people get their feed all full of Crap Vegas from multiple angles. But
that feels like a shot fired, because I think I do put everything on my personal Twitter as well. But then again, it's not my actual personal Twitter. It's more of we'll call it a professional Twitter, even though that's not what it is.
It wasn't a shot fired at you at all. It's a challenge.
Okay.
It's like, what do I respond to that's my own? What's the Crap Vegas?
Yeah, I already took it personally, Josh, so it's too late for that now. Okay, so we do need to talk about a little bit of website difficulties that we had since the last time we recorded. No, it wasn't Josh's fault, and I don't even particularly think it was my fault. I don't know what happened, but at some point in the past couple months, our forums that we had set up that I had spent a long time customizing, making look just like our website. I love the features that I had built into it. Everything was great, and then it got attacked by like foreign bots posting random messages every day. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Well, I thought I got them all cleared out. But then all of a sudden, anybody that tried to register for the forums after we promoted them so much last episode was told that their IP was banned and they couldn't get on there. And no, that was not your IP that was banned. It turns out it was everyone's IP because I couldn't even get on there.
So, and this was literally, folks, the day after the episode dropped.
Oh, yeah. Everybody go to crapvegas.com/board, I think it was, or /forum, whatever it happened to be. And yeah, you could not register. You could not post. You were just completely blocked out. So I said, okay, no problem. I'll fix it. Well, in the process of fixing it, not only did I break the forums, but I also broke the whole website and took it down for the good part of a day. The website was back up that evening, but the forums I had to just completely build from scratch. They're not customized anymore because I haven't had time to do that. So they're going to look a little different than they did when the site first launched. but give me a month or two like I had before, and hopefully we'll be back to where we were before.
But they are up and running and working just as forums should, and we're getting a little bit of fun, interaction with people and people asking some good questions, and so appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something Josh and I both have a tendency to forget, at least I know I do, is that not everybody does follow us on Twitter, or not everybody's an active Twitter follower. And we did have a tendency to post more things on Twitter than anywhere. And I'm sure a lot of people were missing out on that. So we're hoping maybe the message boards would be a more, communal place for everybody to kind of meet up, ask their questions, get answered, maybe in a more timely fashion if we can, but a little bit more formal than just getting like a DM back from one of us with a quick 2-line answer to your question. And the good thing about the forums is if you do post a question, others probably have that same question. And then if we give our response on there, then everybody can kind of see it instead of a Twitter DM being more private.
Yep, that's exactly right. And it's a good reminder to the two of us when we first started this podcast, we had our Twitter profiles, and that's kind of how we knew each other, and that's how we kind of, envisioned our audience to begin with. And I think as our podcast has grown, and appreciate everyone that's jumped along the ride, we're trying to grow beyond just our Twitter feed, that kind of thing. So appreciate the activity on the forum if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I know how many listeners we have on an episode basis, and I know how many Twitter followers that we have, and they don't match up. There's a lot more listens than there ever will be followers. So obviously, we're probably excluding some people. So we definitely want to be as inclusive as we possibly can. But we thought the main topic for this episode is something that I wrote an article on the website about, I don't know, a month or two ago probably at this point, and we meant to address it quicker, but just a lot of other topics came up. We want to talk about casino credit. We've had a lot of questions come through that we keep pushing off for people. So we kind of have an idea of what to do with this episode to kind of cover all the questions that you may have, and kind of a rundown of my article in general that kind of addresses all these things.
That sounds perfect. And casino credit is one of those things. I think, not everyone wants to have casino credit. Not everyone maybe gambles at the level that they think is appropriate for casino credit. But I think a lot of people are curious about it. And, you might tuck this away at some point. If your gambling reaches a point where it makes sense, then you can kind of file this away and refer back to it if it makes sense.
And I actually think casino credit can be valuable for a lot of players, not specific to large players by any means. We'll talk about it in a minute, but a lot of casinos will issue, credit lines for as small as $1,000.
I think I've even heard 500 at some properties downtown.
I'm sure, yeah, I was going to say, I haven't seen it that small, but that wouldn't surprise me. So I think that, depending on the casino and where you're going, there are multiple options for almost every type of player out there where it can be beneficial, even at that small increment. But Josh, let's talk first about the difference between casino credit and front money, because I think these two things kind of get intermingled sometimes for people, and they may not understand the difference. So Josh, why don't you explain first what casino credit actually is?
So casino credit, we talked a little bit about it really early on, maybe even episode 1, touched on in episode 1 or 2, but we'll to go into a little more detail here. Casino credit is exactly what you think it is. It's the casino extending you credit for you to gamble at their property. And it's exactly what you think. It's a line of credit with the casino that you draw money against while you're gambling at the property. And you have to pay it back in a certain amount of time after you leave the property if you don't pay it then. Would you say that's about right, Chris?
I think that's right. When people ask me and need an even more vaguer picture than that, I usually just refer to it as a post-dated check. You're giving them a check that they eventually will cash if you don't repay it, but in advance they're giving you a cash advance on that check. And it's yes, it is a true line of credit.
Yep. And I was going to say the difference between casino credit and a credit card, one difference between them is it is an interest-free line of credit. You are getting that cash while you're gambling, or that money while you're gambling, without having to pay any interest until you pay it back.
Yeah,
now, absolutely. That's assuming you pay it back on time and so on.
Yeah, there's bad things that can happen, and we'll talk about all that here in just a second.
Leg breaking.
But I don't think they do that anymore, but they will throw you in jail in certain states.
I was going to say leg
knee. It can be just as bad. Then you got to have a good lawyer. So on the other side of things, let's talk about front money. A front money, that's your money that you're depositing with the casino cage in advance of your trip typically. Now, you can do it upon arrival, but typically what most people do is they send a wire to the casino cage, for $1,000, $5,000, whatever it is, and send that money in to the casino in advance. And then once you're there, you can draw that money down, taking markers, just the way that you could on casino credit. The only difference is that money's never going to be repaid because it's your money. There's no paying back of markers. There's none of that. You're not going to get a statement at the end. You're just drawing your own money down. And then at the end of the trip, you can work with the cage on what you want to do with anything that happens to be left, whether it's, having them wire that money back to you, you making a payment, to get it back to the original amount so they can reverse the wire. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. And if you deposited cash with the cage upon arrival, they're just going to give you that same cash back. So you can do that as well. It just depends on how you sent the money in. But casino credit requires a large application process we're going to talk about. Front money, there's no real application. They'll have you fill out a form so they can source the funds and notate where it came from. But everyone is theoretically approved for front money.
One comment that I had, Chris, as you're talking about front money, and I don't know if you can shed any light on this, but I've only done front money one time. And it was, I think I mentioned it when I was talking about it early on in the show. I was at Wynn and I hadn't brought enough cash for what I wanted to do. So I decided in the middle of my trip that I was going to wire front money. And in this case, it wouldn't technically be front, I guess, but middle money.
Middle money. Yeah.
That I was going to wire money in. So the one thing I wanted to mention, so I did all that, just as Chris said, but I was told that I couldn't withdraw. Like at the end, I couldn't have that whole amount in cash at one time, something like that. So I don't remember the specifics, but basically they had whatever was left over, they had to wire back to its original source, something like that.
You wired the money in, correct?
Yeah, I wired the money in.
Yeah, I think the general rule is whatever method that money comes in is the same method that it has to go out. Because then you're starting to get into conversion, different methods of cash and stuff. And that could theoretically aid a money launderer or something along those lines. So
I don't think they know about that.
They don't want to take a wire in that's a non-cash transaction, give you gaming chips, which are non-cash transactions, and then eventually convert that all over to cash because that defeats the whole point of it. So I'm sure that's why they did it. And it's the same reason why if you bring cash in, they want to give you back that same cash when you leave if they can. That's ideal for them.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into the pros and cons of casino credit. Josh, I think there are some big pros of casino credit for most people. And at least for me, the biggest one by far is just not having to carry cash. Because if you're a lower level player, it's not as big of a deal to have $300 or $500 in your wallet or in your pocket or wherever you want to put it. If you're somebody that's spending... Yeah, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you feel good, that's fine. I do not want that shoe money. I don't want that bra money. Keep that away from me. But however you want to bring it, that's fine. But for somebody that, is playing much larger for, 3, 4, 5 days, and they want to bring 10, 20, 30,000, whatever it is.
That gives you a limp.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you'd be weighted down on one side.
If you have it in your shoe, you're all of a sudden one leg is an inch higher than the other. If you
try to put in a pouch around your waist, you could have back problems. There's so many things that could go wrong.
I'm taking us off the rail here, sorry.
Yes, that is not the exact problem I was talking about. But yes, there are certain physical side effects to carrying that much money. No, so carrying that kind of cash, it's never convenient. If you're in a car, it's not as big of a deal as it is on a plane. And personally, I actually had this happen last weekend or 2 weeks ago, whenever I was in Boston. I was going through my local, I can't keep track anymore. I really can't. But I was going through my local
podcast. There's no dates.
I was going through my local airport and I had a certain amount of cash with me that was over $10,000. So it was a large amount. And I think most places you read will tell you if you're going through TSA and you have more than that amount of cash, you're supposed to technically declare it, I think, and initiate, where it came from and all that stuff. It's BS and nobody's actually going to do that. But 99% of the time I travel with that kind of cash and nothing ever happens from it. But this past weekend, it got flagged when going through security. They saw it in a bag and I guess I had it clumped up way too much compared to usual or not spread out or whatever it happened to be. And they had to open the bag and he's looking around through everything trying to find, what is setting off this image on my screen. And then eventually he opened the zipper and saw the cash in there and he was very nice about it. He said, "Oh, just be careful. Don't lose your bag." But other TSA agents could be a lot harder than that and want to pull you to the side, want to question you. Where's this cash from? Where's it going to? They could also confiscate it. And getting that money back is an absolute nightmare. So there's a lot of downsides to try to carry that kind of cash with you anywhere. But
Right.
having casino credit avoids all that. You don't have to bring any cash with you. And more importantly, to access your own money, you don't have to pay any fees. There's no ATM fees. There's no check cashing fees. There's no, oh no, I've reached the limit on my ATM card. How can I get around this fees? It's your money and it's always available.
That's absolutely right. And those are, I think you touched on the main reasons. They're really the main pros. It's having that access to those funds, whether it's wired or whether it's a line of credit, without having to carry that cash around with you. Yep. And that's from session to session or from, as a trip to a whole.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only other things I think worth mentioning, we talked about it just a second ago a little bit, since this is not cash that you're dealing with. Technically, it's a wire and it's casino chips. There are no CTRs that we've mentioned before, so you don't have to worry about any paperwork on the back end associated with that. It puts you on the casino's radar, which I think can be important. Yeah, right. I mean, I think that's the big thing. When you open a line of credit, the casino knows kind of what your value now is on a potential trip to them. So it may open you up to receive some comps that you might not have had before. It may get you in contact with a host when nobody had ever actually talked to you before. There's some very positive things that can come from doing this. And the last one Josh touched base on a minute ago, there's no repayment for 15, 30 days after your trip ends, and it's interest-free. So as long as you have the funds to pay it back, you're effectively getting a 30, 45-day loan, interest-free, no fees, that the casino's floating for you, which is great.
Absolutely. And just going back up one point, Chris, to the casino, it putting you on the casino's radar. I mean, I think that's not something to be, ignored. I think that's, wiring money in ahead of time, front money, or setting up line of credit lets the casino know that you're going to play there. You're not, people aren't doing that if they don't intend to gamble there. And we'll talk more about my process, coming up with Aria soon. But as I mentioned before, one of the things that I do when I contact a host for the first time is I tell them a little about my gambling history and so on. And setting up my relationship with the host at Aria and getting my first stay at Aria booked, I said in my first email, hey, I'm also going to sign up for a line of credit. And as soon as I did, I let my host know I just submitted that application.
Oh, yeah. And they're going to track that all the way through, see what it's approved for. And they're going to be very excited on the back end when they see that, for sure.
Exactly.
One other thing I was going to mention, we talked about carrying large amounts of cash. It is a pain in the butt in airports and stuff, but it can be dangerous in casinos as well. Mm-hmm. Carrying large amounts of cash in a casino makes you a target for certain crimes. So, if they see that kind of money in your pocket, or you leaving the table or leaving the cashier, with that kind of thing, they may want to follow you around. Or if you're going to a different place, they may follow you outside. They may try to follow you to your room. I just try to avoid that completely. Keep it in chips if you can. Chips is always going to be safer than cash, other than the potential for potentially losing those chips. I don't want to do that. But if I can keep it in chip form, non-cash, then I'm happy.
And Chris, this is something that actually just happened to me last time we were at Wynn. I don't remember if we were together. No, we must have been together. But I had...
We come as a pair. We had to be.
That's right. I had more cash than they had markers in the back at the cage. They were somewhere out on the floor and so on. And they said one thing we can do, and I've never really thought about this. It doesn't matter if you have lines of credit or not. The cage can take a cash deposit from you.
Sure.
And store that, that basically goes on your account as essentially would be front money if you weren't paying back a line of credit. So it functions the same way. So if you end up with a lot of cash, if you have a great session, you can, at least in my experience at the Wynn, you can take that money to the cage. They can deposit it for you. And that way you then have that money with them. They don't have to carry it around. Just one. I don't know if you have any experience with that. That was the first time I'd seen that, but.
Not that directly, and I think I was there when that happened for you. And yes, they're always welcome to take those. It's effectively a front money deposit in the middle of a trip that they're just keeping for you.
And they gave me a receipt and everything like that.
Oh, yeah. I think it's fully secure. I don't think you have any worries about getting your money back. And I'll go even further than that. There's been times in the past where my earnings from a trip have been fairly significant, and it was too much cash for me to want to carry home. Right. So if you go through the channels properly, you can even get a check issued instead of cash to take with you to try to protect yourself in those situations. It's a little bit lengthy. It's not going to be an instantaneous thing. They're going to have to look at all your play while you're there for the trip and make sure that the amount that they're giving you matches up with the earnings that they're showing on their side, to make sure you're not trying to sneak something in there to get a wire out. or, or check in this case, because you're converting cash to another method now. But they can do that for you as well. So there are ways to avoid carrying large amounts of cash in the casino and even out of the casino at the end of your trip.
That's cool.
So let's talk about the cons. Cons, I think it all depends on who you are as a person. Casino credit is terrific because the moment you ask for a marker, they're going to have a lammer on the table and those chips are going to be pushed out, in 30 seconds, which is great. Unless you're a gambler that has a proclivity to, get dragged in and spend more than they ever should. Having that cash immediately available never gives you a chance to even think about, well, maybe I shouldn't take another marker. Maybe I should get up and walk around or switch to a different table, try a different game, play a slot machine. Any of those things kind of get removed when markers are involved because you won't even think about it.
That's absolutely right. And the other thing, I don't know, again, Chris, we kind of come from gambling a little bit. Our history is different, but I have found since I've had casino credit, since I've had markers available to me, that my gambling has increased. Not my frequency, but my level of gambling.
No, the level of play has. I agree with that 100%.
And I think that is, it's
which I think is what they want, by the way, Josh.
Absolutely.
The casino is very happy about that.
But it's, I guess some of it's just practical that when you're bringing cash, unless you're going to carry around a big, an armored pouch full of cash, you really only can carry so much cash with you practically. Yes. When you have a line of credit, and this goes to Chris's point, you have access to that, that amount of money for a trip or for a session without having to go back to your room, without having to go back to a safe deposit box, or without having to bring it from home. Yeah. And so it's, I found
it makes a big difference. I agree.
Yeah. I'm much more likely to spend more or to want to spend more on a trip having a line of credit.
I mean, I'll touch base on a couple other things that can be considered, cons in this case. But by far, I think that's the most important thing that everyone should consider before they take the steps of applying for credit. Because if you are somebody that has any sort of tendencies to go too far sometimes, not want to take a break, this is going to only make it worse. It's not going to help you. So I would encourage you to hold off on that, stick to cash, stick the cash in your room so you have to go back up and grab it before you think about going back to a table. Do whatever makes sense to you. If it's not a big of a deal, then great. Casino credit's terrific.
Or when you set up a line of credit, ask for a smaller amount than you might get, if you ask for the max, that kind of thing. They're not going to give you more credit than you ask for. At least I don't think. I've never had that.
No, I don't think so. No, and that's a good point.
Maybe you want to get, maybe your gambling budget, I'm just going to make up numbers, but maybe your gambling budget is $5,000 for a weekend. Maybe ask for a line of credit for $2,500 or, I'm just making numbers up, but that wouldn't hurt either. If you have a tendency to worry about going over.
Put an artificial cap on yourself. Yeah. So that you have to at least think about it before you get up to the maximum of what you want to do. That's actually a smart move, Josh. I wouldn't have thought to do that, but I do like that. But you are correct. We'll talk about it during the application process. They will prompt you for how much you expect in credit, how much you're requesting. And 99% of the time, as long as the funds are good, that's what they're going to approve. They're not going to give you more than you asked for. They're only going to give you less if there's not funds in your bank account to really support the request.
I have a story that counters is not the right word, but a little bit of I fall into that 1% if your 99% is right.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, when I first applied for credit at Wynn, they gave me less than I asked for.
Okay.
Not because I didn't have the funds, but because Wynn, at least the way it was, and my credit's very good and so on and so forth. But Wynn, maybe it was just me, maybe it was personal, but Wynn,
we don't like to cut your jib.
That's right. But anyway, Wynn, I lost my train of thought. Wynn gave me less than I had requested. And they said we like to actually have, and I didn't have credit at any other casino property in Las Vegas at that time.
Okay.
So that's one factor to consider. So they said they prefer to have a track record before they, increased it. So I was at where I started for a year, and then I called them and said, can we raise it up to what I originally requested? And they said, no problem, easily done. So that was the very first line of credit I had. So that may have factored in.
You say that, and I'm sure the same thing probably happened to me when I established credit, 5-7 years ago with some property when I was first starting on a credit player. So I do remember my lines at some casinos are much lower than what I have at, say, Wynn or, Resorts World or something like that I play a little heavier at. And I'm sure they probably did want to ease me in just to make sure, hey, if we give this guy this much,
Right.
what's going to happen? I mean, I'd probably want to know the answer to that too before I went too crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, I just
So-
wanted to mention that as you were talking about them giving you what you asked for. It doesn't always happen.
No, well, I said there's times where they won't.
No, I know.
I'm just saying they don't ever go above what you ask for. I've never
No,
heard of
I don't
that.
think so. Me either.
If you ask for 10 grand, they're not going to say, well, you're good for 30. We're going to,
Right.
No, they're not going to do that. That would actually cause more problems, I think, for them if they did. Especially if you blew that 30 grand and then you could sue them on the back end and
that's
say,
the-
oh, he
yeah,
asked for 10. They gave me 30. They were feeding me drinks. I'm sure it would play into a lawsuit perfectly.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So I think that they try to avoid that. But the other couple things that are worth mentioning as cons potentially of taking credit is that, obviously you have to repay this money. So if your bank account fluctuates significantly, 1 month you have a ton of money, the next month you're kind of low, and your gambling trip overlaps a period where it's kind of low, and they try to pull that money out and it's not there, that's a problem. That's not going to go over easily. They will try to set up a payment plan with you to get all that stuff repaid. But if you just don't have the ability to repay a marker, every state's different. But in Nevada, that is a Class D felony. So you could end up in prison for doing so. So make sure whatever you're requesting as a credit limit, that is cash that you will always have available. No questions asked. It doesn't matter how good, bad month you're having. Doesn't matter if you lost your job 2 months ago. Make sure that you have that money covered.
And I think just, to be a responsible gambling Vegas related podcast, we should also say, I think that should apply. That should be the general rule of thumb to gambling money anyway.
Well, it should. Yes. You should never gamble something that you can't afford to lose. I agree with that 100%.
We're recreational gamblers and we're doing this for fun. And
yes,
hopefully at whatever level you play, it's fun, even if it's never fun if we lose, but that it can be still fun if you lose, and it's not going to,
it's expensive entertainment is what it is.
Right. It's not the rent money.
I sure hope not. But that being said, you see that every time you go on a trip. So that is rather depressing when you see it. The last con I would say about opening casino credit, freedom of play. And what I mean by that is when you take out credit at a casino, that credit is only supposed to be used at that casino. They want you using at their tables, at their slot machines. And they are not very happy when you try to walk with cash from their casino on a credit line. So if you walk up to a table and take a marker for $1,000, you play 3 rolls and it doesn't go very well and you have 800 left, and you color up with 800 left and then walk next door to the next casino with that, after you cash it out at the cashier, that is not going to go over well. They don't want you walking with that.
Yeah, and you risk them canceling your line of credit.
Exactly.
Right.
So if you are somebody that is a casino credit player and you plan on playing multiple properties when you're on your trip, you either better bring some cash with you or have credit lines established at multiple properties, because it's not easy as a credit player to walk up and down the strip and have a ton of cash unless you brought it with you, because there's nowhere to get it from. So just keep that in mind. If you are establishing credit and you do like to move around a lot, you may have to think about a couple other things when you get there.
And that has a, guess I'm trying to say, if you have a losing session and you lose half of your marker buy-in, you don't, yes, you can have that. If you bought in for $3,000, lost $1,500, you can't pay that marker back, obviously, because you don't have that $1,500. It doesn't mean you have to go to the cage and deposit that $1,500. You can still walk around with that $1,500 in cash,
Correct.
and that's not a deal. I think what Chris is saying is using your marker to really fund your gambling trips to other properties. That's what's frowned upon.
And I think what you see this more at, Josh, is slot players will take a marker and get a slot ticket, for $1,000, whatever it is.
Right.
They'll go stick it in a machine. They'll do one spin, get another ticket back, and then take it to the first, kiosk and cash it out, and then walk with that $985 or whatever it is that, that you got change.
Don't offend all the slot players. We have some big slot playing listeners.
I mean, I think we're 2 of them now, Josh.
That's true.
I've had more W2Gs this year than I've ever had in my life. So I guess we are too. So let's talk about the application process. And it works really well because Josh just got done applying over at Aria for his upcoming trip. So Josh, why don't you talk to people through what the application process looks like?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's I'm going to be staying at Aria, as you know, and I didn't have a line of credit, and I really like, since I've started playing with credit, I just think that's a great way to go if you can, and if you gamble at the levels that it makes sense. So I reached out to my host, as I said, and asked her for an application to set up a line of credit. She sent me a PDF form, and I found the line of credit on the application online, and much easier to do it online than it is printing out a PDF.
I don't think I've ever had anybody actually try to send me a paper form. They always push you through their online system, to get all the signatures and disclosures.
I may have said, "Can you send me the application?" Or and so she said, "All right."
She's thinking this guy doesn't have the internet.
He's
I'm
old
to
school,
send him
right?
a paper. Did you fax it back to her?
No, I went and did it online and told her, "I hope you don't mind." I did, click the link online. So
Okay.
The really funny thing, and I don't know if this is, excuse me for talking in the mic there. I don't know if this is other MGM properties or if this is just ARIA. So first thing to point out as I'm saying that, your line of credit is specific in most cases to the property itself. So if I'm applying for a line of credit at ARIA, I'm not going to have that line of credit at the other MGM properties. Same thing with the Caesars properties. Wynn and Encore is a little different. One line of credit does apply to Wynn and Encore. And I think we've had people tell us that's the same with Plaza and Palazzo. Not Plaza, sorry.
Venetian.
Thank you.
Yep, gotcha.
Plaza and Palazzo.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go to Plaza downtown and then get your high life down there. And then when you slum it, you come back to Palazzo. Okay, let's refocus here, Josh. Application.
Sorry. So I was saying, so I'm filling out my application for ARIA, and it's an online form. It asks you for all your regular details. Chris, the funniest thing, I told Chris about this, he may have forgotten when I'm filling it out. The application at ARIA, which I'm assuming is the same application at all the MGM properties, says, "What generation am I?"
the first?
I'm like, what the heck question is that? They want me to
come
say,
up a lot? Yeah.
Am I millennial? Am I like, is that what it is?
Gen Z. Yeah.
Seriously, it just says generation. And I'm like,
they wanted you to call yourself out for being a boomer. Is what it was,
No.
Josh. Yeah.
I may think like a boomer. No, seriously, that was like, what in the heck is it asking me for? Anyway, it just said generation. I'm assuming it did mean junior or senior or the third or whatever.
Third, yeah.
What popped into my head was millennial or Generation X or whatever.
I'm right there with you.
So I filled out the application. Off it went. MGM almost immediately did a hard credit pull. So I have an alert on my credit. I get a notification when anybody's inquiring about my credit. I think the next day I got an alert saying they had pulled my credit. So I guess backing up one quick, as part of the application, you're asked to verify your income. You're asked to verify the levels in the bank accounts you want to use. You're asked to provide your bank account information so that they can verify that those funds are there. An important thing that's come up on Twitter a few times that people have had questions about: money in, something like a mutual fund or 401k or stock portfolio does not count in what they're looking for. That they want to see ready cash in your checking or savings account when they're looking for sources to pay those markers back. And so if you have all your money tied up in one of those other non-liquid forms of investment, then you may or may not qualify for the line of credit you're looking for unless you have that in cash. So something to keep in mind. So off I go. I fill out the application, give all that information, and heard back right away that they pulled my credit history. And then it took a week, was all it was, for ARIA to complete that process and tell me that my line of credit had been set up and they're excited to have me and so on.
Yeah, and I've had them respond back to me as quickly as 2 days saying it's approved. The only thing I will say for people out there is when it comes to bank account balances, they absolutely do verify those balances. Yep. Some applications may ask for a general range of what you have. That's not very common. Typically, they just want the bank account info. Give me the name of the bank. Is it checking or savings? And if you have a contact, list a number there for them to know. But they're absolutely going to call the bank and get usually your 3, 6, and 12-month balances on that account. So if your 3-month balance is really high because you just put some cash in there, but your 6 or 12-month balance in that account is really low because you usually don't have a lot of cash, that could cause some issues. They just want to make sure that what they're extending credit-wise, I think they never want to exceed 50% of what you really have in liquid cash available. But I think ideally they'd rather be in the 25% range or less, obviously.
And Chris, that reminds me, somewhere during the application process, I had to send in 2 months worth of bank statements. I think because they couldn't reach the department they wanted to, or something like that. And
I've had that before, Josh, and I've also had, and don't let this freak you out if they do it, I've had them before where they tried to verify an account. They couldn't get through. I think it was PNC. It was a regional bank sort of thing.
Right.
And then they had to get me on a 3-way call with the bank to verify the funds while I'm on the phone. Because I had to authorize it for them to hear it, because I guess maybe that bank wouldn't confirm it for them directly. I've had that happen before. And then I've even had where I had a credit line at a property. Each year, they like to renew it and make sure everything's good. So they've called me out of the blue and said, hey, this is blank from Casino Credit. Can we do a 3-way call with your bank shortly to re-verify funds? Cosmo was huge on that. I don't know why, but they would do it once a year. And I've had it at one other property before too. But they just want to make sure you're not having huge fluctuations in your account before you come out and start playing again.
Now, Chris, do you know, is it, I've kind of heard, is there one, I don't know what you call it, one company
repository?
That manages, company that manages all the lines of credit in Vegas, or?
Yeah, it's called like Central Credit or something. I'm not 100% familiar with them, but you'll notice that all the applications seem to feed to the same place. And they typically know at any given time what your history was with it. With the other casinos you've had credit at. And that's why they typically ask, did you have credit before at any other property? So that they can say, oh, okay, you're in the system. I'll go find out what your history was there. And I can tell you, Josh, from personal experience, I even had a host at Cosmo that used to know if I had markers out at other properties.
Big Brother is
which
watching.
I don't know how I feel about them having that information. But, sometimes you'd come and, I guess it's maybe, I don't know if it's good or a bad thing, but if you have credit established in multiple places, which I think in Vegas, I have it at 6 or 7 different properties.
Way ahead of me.
Well, I think 3 of them now have expired, which we'll talk about because I haven't been there in so long. But at the time though, you had like 6 active lines at a pretty large number. And then you're starting to get into, extremely large amounts that you could potentially have floating out across the city.
Right.
And I think they just want to make sure, hey, we know kind of what you have in your bank account. You better not have 80% of it out at other casinos and then come here and try to take one. So yes, they do communicate back and forth. If you screw one casino on repayment, all of them are going to hear about it. And your lines would theoretically be shut down at all of them. So it's kind of an all or nothing thing, I think.
And one thing I forgot to mention that you touched on there, Chris, as part of the application at Aria, I did have to say where else I had credit and how much I had that credit. So that factored in.
I think they also use that information, Josh, on the positive side, though. If you do have credit already established with somebody,
yes,
and they ask you how much it's for, they're much more likely to approve you at that level since you already have it somewhere else.
Yep.
So I think it actually does work to your benefit if you are filling out that form to list it if you have it and list the highest one that you have. Because especially if you're asking for that much again,
right?
Don't say you have $1,000 line at Casino A if you're requesting 10,000 from them and you already have 10,000 from somebody else. I would list the largest one you have available. And I think that gives you some more, some credence that you're actually going to repay this thing.
Yep.
So, okay, Josh, you got approved for credit. You got your notice. You show up at the casino. What happens now? What do you do?
Well, the first thing you have to do is go and sign your line of credit application. So I have to, when I get to Aria, I have to physically go to the cage or wherever it is, and probably the cage. Sometimes there's a credit office. And sign, give my ID, prove that I am who I say I am, and sign my line of credit application, I guess. And then I'm eligible to go out to the craps table and get a marker for however much money and start.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing there. The credit becomes instantly available as soon as they have your signatures on file. At that point, they'll typically tell you what their repayment terms are. And every casino is different. Mm-hmm. Some will want it repaid in 10 days, some 15, some will give you 30 days. And some don't even invoice you for like 2 weeks after you leave. So it actually becomes a lot longer than that. And then they'll also give you wire instructions and everything like that if you need it, but you'll get sent those after the fact.
One thing that I think is worth mentioning probably right here is the line of credits at most casinos are only available, at least in Vegas, are only available when the property knows you're going to be there. So if you have a reservation, yes, your line of credit will be tied in and activated on your day of arrival. If you're going to be in Las Vegas and you have credit at different properties and you're not staying there, the credit is not necessarily going to be active. So you don't want to let your host know or the credit department that you're going to be there and you want to activate that line of credit, because it's not automatically going to be activated unless you're staying at that property. At least that's my history. So just something to keep in mind is that may not be active if you're not at that property.
100% correct. They typically turn it off when you leave for your protection,
Right.
so that somebody doesn't try to take a marker on your account that's, unrelated to you and just happen to find your card or something. So yeah, if you are somebody that likes to bounce around town and you don't have a host at these properties to let them know, hey, I'm going to be a drop-in today, can you please turn it on? Then just swing by the cage, let them know, hey, I have a line of credit here. I'm a drop-in player. I just want to make sure it's active before I get to the table. And it never even hurts, even if it's a place that knows you're coming, because when it's like this, the first marker you try to take every trip, it's a 5-minute process because they have to walk over to Casino Credit and turn it on every time. And a floor will usually do it for you, or a box, whoever's standing there. They don't want you to have to do it, so they'll be nice enough to walk over and say, hey, Chris and Josh are here. Can you please turn their credit on? But yeah, it never hurts to swing by the cage or the credit desk, whatever they have at that property, upon arrival and say, hey, I'm here. I just want to make sure everything's
Am I good to go? Right.
Yeah.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
okay, you got credit approved. You've signed for everything. Let's talk about how easy it is to take a marker at a table, Josh. So what do you do when you walk up to the table and you want money?
It is super easy to walk up to a table and say, I want money. I have my card out. If it's at Win, I have my Win card out, my Win Black card out, and I
show off.
and I say, can I get a marker for, let's say, $1,000? And that's as easy as that. And obviously, we'll talk etiquette separately, but you want to do it if you're going to be respectful. You want to do it, in between, come out rolls and so on. But just have that card out, and it's pretty obvious if you put your card on a rail, oftentimes with no cash, oftentimes they know right away that's where you're heading. And at places like Win, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a pretty high percentage of players that are non-cash. They're buying in with markers.
Yes.
So that, you might not get that, it might be a little trickier at a place, let's say downtown at, I'm going to say Plaza again, just because I brought them up accidentally earlier, but it might be a little more cumbersome for places that aren't as, don't work with markers quite as much. But for the most part, it's super easy. You walk down, you have your player's card. If you're a newer player, if they don't have you in their system, they might ask you for ID as well. I've seen that, once in a while that you'll get asked for ID, but most of the time they've got my picture in there and they can verify that it's me with my card. And then they'll cut out the chips. And usually at a craps table, they'll cut out the chips, you'll start rolling. And then after that next, after a 7 comes, unfortunately, the boxman will come by with your marker check that you have to sign.
And here, yeah,
and that's what makes it. And you can see them lurking for, let's say you go on a nice roll, it's a 20-minute roll. The boxman's standing there with his,
God,
with
is he ever going to 7 out here? I just
on
want a signature
on a clipboard, and he's waiting there with his pen. And you're like,
God,
I know it's going to come.
It?
As soon as a 7 comes, he's going to walk over that check.
I know it is a horrible feeling every time you sign it, but
it is really, really. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead. Oh,
no, I was going to say a couple things, at least from my experience, I thought was worth mentioning. Yeah, some properties have your photo ID as soon as they swipe your card. So your picture will pop up next to your credit profile and they'll know it's you. So they don't have to ask for an ID. Places like Resorts World that use the little kind of like iPad check thing.
I was going to ask you
it's
about
more
that.
digital. Yeah. There you have to have a PIN. But as soon as they swipe your card through, it literally pulls up your driver's license in front of them on the screen so they know it's you. So they don't have to ask. You just input your PIN, confirm the amount, and then they'll cut it out for you. But smaller places that don't have that kind of technology, they still will need your driver's license. And even some places in Vegas, Josh, I still have to get my driver's license when I go because they aren't familiar with me. They don't have my picture in front. They just want to verify I am who I am. And probably the biggest complaint I have against my local property that I play at a ton, everybody there knows me, of course. I mean, they're very familiar with me at this point. But when I go to take a marker, they aren't a casino that will put a lammer on the table and say like, $3,000 and go ahead and cut it out and do it. They make you wait all the way until the marker's printed, bring it around, have you sign it, and then they'll cut the checks out. And they're horribly slow about it. I don't know what they're doing every time that they issue one. Now, granted, I've never seen another credit player at the casino, so I don't think it's very common for them. But at the same time, if you take a marker there, it's going to take 5 to 10 minutes. That's usually about what it takes to actually get it. And you'll miss 3 or 4 rolls. I hate it every time, but you do. But in Vegas, it's not like that. For the most part, you ask for a marker, you'll have it in under a minute. That money will be pushed your way.
And they're gonna cut those chips out, and you're gonna be rolling, as I said, before you even sign for that. In Las Vegas, sign for that that marker, and that's different, I believe, in Atlantic City. Atlantic City, I think you have to sign before you can use.
Some places are much
chips,
bigger
right.
sticklers about that, getting that signature. In Vegas, they'll track you down. And a lot of the bigger Vegas casinos, especially like Wynn or Bellagio, they have pit clerks that specifically for credit.
That's right. They have somebody sitting right there.
That's her whole job. When you request a marker and he swipes the card, she's the one that's going to print it off, make sure everything matches and everything's good. She'll give it to the box. The box will have you sign it. He'll give it back to her. She'll run it to the cage. And then say you want to redeem that marker, which we'll talk about in a minute. She'll go get the marker for you and bring it to the table. Not every casino has that option available. They just don't have that much staff. So you may or may not be able to redeem it at the table per se. But yeah, it does help at larger properties when they have staff supporting this operation. Okay, something I don't do terribly much, Josh, but I have done before is take a marker at the cage, specifically because I wanted to play slots and I didn't have any cash in my pocket. Is that something you've done?
I've never done it. I mean, I've certainly used marker money for slots, but it's always been, after craps run, if I have half of my marker buy-in left or something like that. But I haven't taken a marker specifically to play slots. So as we talk about this, if we get Chris, if we get anything wrong, I know we have some listeners who are slot players and also play on markers. If we get anything wrong, let us know for sure.
Well, here's my experience. I've done it once. It was the exact same process as a table. They had me sign the form just like they normally would. The only difference was they gave me an actual slot ticket with the amount that I requested rather than cash. I mean, obviously they can't give you gaming chips. So the equivalent for slot play was just one of those little white slot tickets, the ticket in, ticket out, that had the amount that I requested.
Right. I'm surprised it's not somehow just loaded into your player account, as the way that free play is, for example, or something like that.
Sure.
That you wouldn't access off your card. It's interesting that it's an actual paper ticket.
That's not my experience. And if somebody else has seen that, let me know, because I'd be curious to know. Resorts World's big on that whole cashless thing, deposit money onto your account. I'm sure they could easily do it, but I wonder if all casinos, have that functionality built into their players.
Yeah, if anybody knows, let us. That's your call out for this week.
But at least for me, I asked for a marker at the cage. They printed it. I signed. She handed me a slot ticket, and off I went, and everything was the same. And the only thing else when it talks about taking a marker that I wanted to mention, there are what are called TTOs, which stands for this trip only. So
that's when you really get in trouble.
Once. Yeah, if you really want to get in trouble, this is where it comes in. Say you have a credit line for $1,000, but you're at your max. You just want to play a little bit more. And you're like, hey, can I just get $250 more? You can ask. And a host can approve it, or a casino credit manager, or whoever else happens to be in the chain. For most players, it's going to be their host doing it. But they can approve a one-time, this trip only TTO advance on your credit line further than what you've been approved for. Usually they'll just look at your average balances and make sure that you're not taking more than you truly have available. And if that's the case, then typically they'll approve it and they'll understand. And they'll be really happy that you're playing more than you were going to. Right. But that being said, I would not fall into a habit of doing that. They absolutely can deny that request every time that you make it. It's up to them. And I wouldn't do it if you didn't have to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard of them. I actually had I won't tell the story. It's not a good story, but a situation where it was
none of the stories would
tell the story. No, It's just, I think it was when raised my credit line. And so I went in the first trip afterwards and they didn't have it right in the system or something like that. And they said something like, oh, this is what is it? TTO?
TTO, yep.
They said this is a TTO, and I'm like, no, it's not, kind of thing. And so a little bit of back and forth on that. But I have never had to ask for one, and I really hope I don't, because that means I would have gotten myself in further than I want to.
In principle, nowadays I wouldn't ask for it. When I took one, my credit lines were significantly lower,
right?
And they were significantly lower than what I typically played too. I had artificially kept them low, kind of like you mentioned earlier, just to kind of protect myself and make sure I didn't take too much. But it was it was at a blackjack table. I was at, I'd already taken all the markers I could possibly take. And of course, that one hand pops up where you're at max bet for you and you get, 3 splits and 2 doubles. And next thing you know, you need a couple
money.
extra grand to cover it.
Right.
So I was like, hey, can we do this? And I had to wait, 5 minutes or so to get it all approved and stuff. But you know what? I won that hand, Josh, and I paid off all those markers. And I was really excited.
Does that transition into paying off markers?
Yeah, I think it does. So let's talk about how we pay back a marker. So if you want to pay them back at the table, most people call that a marker buyback. And what you'll do is as you're going to color up, they'll probably know you have a couple markers out and say, hey, do you want to pay those back if that's an option for that casino? Or you can always just say, hey, I want to pay off my markers that I have open, or I want to pay off one marker for X dollars if I have that open. And when you color up, they'll put to the side the chips that cover that marker or markers you're paying off. They'll put a little hammer on it that says, how much it is or whatever it is for that casino. And then they'll bring you a copy of your marker that you signed for that amount. You can rip it up yourself and throw it away and you're done. It's a pretty easy process.
Part, by the way, is when they bring you that check, you sign that marker check that you signed and you get to rip it up and give it back to the
terrific feeling.
Box,
just say, here, toss this bad boy for me. Yeah, it is a terrific feeling.
And one thing you can do, you don't see it, sorry, Chris, you don't see it too often, but occasionally someone will pay off a marker in the middle of play. So, that we will have had a good roll or a good session at a craps table, and the person wants to stay but wants to get rid of that credit that's hanging over them, that marker, and will say, can I pay off my $3,000 marker right now, and then play with the balance of whatever's left. And that's not
great
a bad way to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the willpower to do that. That would be terrific. Maybe we should try that sometime, Josh.
You do see it from time to time, and it is worth noting that you can do that, and maybe you should do that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I know as soon as I did that, like 10 minutes later, I was like, hey, can I get that marker back? Yeah, I need another marker. So I don't think that would be very successful for me, but I do like that you can do that. So let's talk about redeeming markers at the cage. It's probably the second best way to do it if you can. Josh, what are your experiences paying markers back in a cage?
So paying markers back at the cage is almost as easy as paying them off of the table. Paying off the table is great, as we said, because it's usually they have the marker right there. The only time that's not the case is if there had been a shift change or however the timing goes, and they have taken that marker back to the cage. So occasionally you'll try and pay off a marker at a table, and the box will say, oh, that marker's already at the cage, you have to pay it off there. So then we go to the cage, and you pay off your marker just the same way. They will go back to wherever they have it, bring it out to you. First, they'll verify in the system that you know how much you have in markers, and they'll set your cash in back there, and they'll go to find that marker, and they'll come back. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's even like you're at Win Encore, and the marker's at Encore, and you're at Win. Somebody has to go and get it, and
manually so walk between places. Right. Yeah.
It's actually can be a little bit of a process, but eventually they'll get that marker to you and you can tear it up just as you would, you did out at the pit. The only difference is occasionally you'll get that in between time where you're at the cage and the marker is not there yet. It might be at a table still, if you were a Wanderer, let's take Win and Encore. If it's still at a table at Encore, it hasn't even gone to any cage yet, that kind of thing. And that's where you can always deposit money that'll go towards a marker later if you want to save yourself having to come back.
Yeah. I mean, paying at the cage, it is easy. It is slower, though, significantly slower. Paying a marker at the cage typically takes at least 5 minutes, if not 10, for them to track it down and get it back to you in that whole process. And Josh is right. Something to keep in mind is, depending on the property, sometimes markers automatically transfer to the cage immediately, so you can quickly go pay it off there and you can't pay at the table. Some of them keep them in the pit for the whole period of that session. So, they break in 8-hour shifts for the dealers. So if it's a swing marker, it's going to stay in the pit until swing goes off. And,
right.
So there are things you have to keep in mind on where it may be. Sometimes it can be harder to track down than you want it to be. But yes, you can always pay the cage, just make a deposit and they'll apply it as soon as it comes in or when you leave, whatever you want to do. That's no problem at all. But payments after you leave, this is what I'm most used to 90% of the time because I got my butt kicked. And most casinos will send you a statement. It may take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to even get the statement after you leave, but they'll send you an email with a statement saying, hey, here's how much you owe. Here's our wiring instructions. Let us know if you want to send your own wire in or do you just want us to deposit the checks that we have? That's an option as well. They can always just deposit that check that you manually signed while you were there. Now, the only thing you don't want to do is let it get to the very end of the due date and not have done anything, which I used to do all the time. I really did. I just forgot about it. And it's like, well, they'll deposit the check eventually. Try not to do that. If you can, when I get a statement, I try to respond within a day and just say,
me too.
Hey, I'm wiring the funds in, or hey, can you just go ahead and deposit those checks depending on where I'm pulling the cash from to pay it. But you'll get a statement. Not every casino sends statements, Josh, I've found. There's a couple smaller ones that I have credit with that don't send statements.
That's interesting. I don't have as many lines of credit, so I haven't seen that.
They're small places, and I've even talked to their credit manager, who also is a cashier 90% of the time. And I was like, hey, is there a way to get a statement? Well, I mean, I can give you like a screen print of what I show on my side, but like, I don't have like a statement. Did you want me to mail it to you? It's like, no, I mean, just an email would be great. Well, that's a good idea. Maybe we should do that. But no, I mean, some of the smaller properties, they trust you. They don't even have implied terms on when you're going to pay the thing back. Just say, pay it back sometime soon, please. I've even walked up to a table before where I forgot I had a marker out, and I asked for a marker, and the host, the box man back there, he walked around the table. He's like, hey, there's a marker out from like 40 days ago. And I was like, really? I had no idea. He's like, no big deal. I'm still going to give you the amount that you want, but just make sure you swing by the cage and, do something with it. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. And I talked to her and I apologized and said, you can always just deposit those if it gets too far out. I said, that's just me forgetting. Oh, we don't like to do anything without somebody giving us permission. I was like, well, okay, just keep it out there forever.
One thing I wanted to let people know as we're talking about markers, and particularly when it comes to paying off markers, different properties send those marker notices in different form. And what I mean is some will send you the notice via email, and some, as Chris said, will not send you anything, but some will send it via paper snail mail. So if you're someone that is concerned about other people knowing you have markers or credit outstanding, be aware of how that marker, payment due marker will reach you, and just be aware of that. So I guess the best thing I can say. One thing that going through the ARIA application process, MGM, and probably Wynn did this, and I didn't even see it, but I saw it when I was applying at ARIA. They do offer you an alternate address option to have your marker notices sent to. They still have to have your primary address to pull credit and et cetera. But as far as sending the actual paper balance due statements, they can send it to an alternate address if that's a preference.
Yep. I always select email for a reason when they ask me how I want my statements. It's the most secure way, I think, to keep all that information private as can be. But Josh, that sounds like advice for somebody that's trying to stay married.
Exactly. And no, we're not going to talk about the new T-shirt right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you should say when you take out credit, I'm risking divorce for this.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, geez. Okay, Josh, I think that's all I have for credit, unless you had something else, and we can move on.
No, that's marker talk for the day.
So anything you ever wanted to know about credit, there it is. And I'll remind everybody, if you go to our website at crapvegas.com, I did write an article that summarizes pretty much everything we just talked about with pictures like of applications and stuff and what to expect. So just go give it a read if you need it and you missed something during this and you don't want to listen to our lovely voices one more time.
And hopefully that wasn't too boring. I mean, I know not everyone uses lines of credit and that kind of thing, but I think a lot of people are curious about how it works, and hopefully we filled in some of those gaps for you. And it's a great thing. And as we said, you can use it. Some of those smaller properties, especially downtown in Las Vegas, you don't have to have big credit limits to have a line of credit. And if you want to set up a $500, if $500 or $1,000 line of credit at a property downtown just to see how it works, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's a great tool for most people. There's some people that should probably exclude themselves from this operation.
Right.
But for most people, I think it's a good way to save a couple bucks and make your life a lot easier in the casino. Okay, Josh, I have a note on this sheet that we use to track what we're talking about. You want to talk about me going back to Encore Boston Harbor.
Yeah, so Chris made, as we talked about last show, Chris made another trip, a second trip to Encore Boston Harbor. And this trip had kind of a purpose, would you say, Chris? And it wasn't that you were going to get a toaster.
No, although I did get that laptop. It did come home. It's sitting in my room, and none of my kids wanted it. So perfect. It's a win-win. No, yeah, this is definitely not the fall trip that we had discussed earlier this year that we were going to take together. But honestly, the whole point was I was looking online, and by the way, don't do this. This is a horrible idea for anybody to do, but that's just who I am. I was looking online, and I was like, oh, look at that. I'm only like 3,000 points away from hitting black with Wynn. And for me, it's a heck of a lot easier to get up to Boston than it is to get out to Vegas. There's direct flights available. It's in the same time zone. Right. Yeah, so I don't have a 3-hour time loss coming home every time. It's just much easier for me. And I really like the property and the host I have up there. He's very good guy. So I was like, well, I don't hate going back up there. There's just certain things that bothered me last trip, but I made the return trip.
And so Chris, Chris, texts me as he's traveling. And so this trip ostensibly was to go up and make it so he can get to Black Tier. So he leaves on, I think it was Friday. And of course, What happens? Flight delays, maintenance issues.
Yeah. Anything that could go wrong getting up there did go wrong. Yeah.
Flight got canceled. Gambling time.
Oh my God, my flight got canceled. My original flight did. It was supposed to be a direct flight. I had to connect in Atlanta. That flight got delayed. There was issues. I mean, anything that could have gone wrong did. And it made for a absolutely horrible trip getting from Kentucky up to Boston. I think it took like 8 hours for what should have taken 2 hours and 15 minutes.
But you made it.
But I did make it Friday evening.
And I understand that Encore Boston Harbor was nice enough to give you a room super close to the casino floor.
Yes, I think the lowest floor possible for rooms is floor 5, and that is exactly where I was, right next to the elevator.
Easy access, right?
Yeah, I think you mentioned in a previous episode you liked that. I did.
You did say that you actually like the rooms at Encore Boston Harbor better than the rooms at Wynn in Vegas.
I think I do. I mean, it reminds me of the old Wynn rooms, but for some reason it feels a little bit more open. And the bathrooms are the old Wynn style that I much prefer over the new Wynn bathrooms. Right. So I guess it has a nice feel to it. It's got a good setup. I really like the rooms. I mean, I like the old Wynn rooms. I like the new Wynn rooms too, but I just kind of like these Encore rooms in Boston just a little bit better. Not enough to, sway where I would ever go, but it is a nice treat.
That's good. It's great. I'm anxious to see him at some point. Now I won't go into we don't need to go day by day or session by session through Chris's trip, but so I'm looking at my notes about our trip, and one of the things I have is that Chris had a terrible first session. He said, you pay the vig up front on craps, which we knew about already, and the players were miserable, and you didn't accumulate any points at all.
Yeah, I think that no matter what, I mean, I really do like the place, and a lot of good things happen. I did hit black, which was the stated goal of the trip. That was really good. I hit a massive slot jackpot for me, which was really cool. We can talk about for a second.
I'm going to get to that.
But the two things that I take away from going there for a second time, some of it I thought would be fixed, some wouldn't, is the actual patrons. These people are the most miserable people I have ever been around in my life. And I deal with a lot of
nobody's listening and that's offended.
I think anybody that's been up there that's a nice guy knows what they're dealing with because they're used to it. And as an outsider kind of coming into the area, like I have customers up in the Northeast, and we all know, like my sales rep up in that area will tell you, they're the worst people to deal with. They have ridiculously high expectations. They're very gruff. There's no politeness to them. They don't have that Southern charm and hospitality that we give down here, at least. And it's just not a pleasant experience. But these people did everything they could possibly do to make you miserable at the table. Josh, anything that you consider
you said in your text to me that the cash plays, they were calling out action after
every
the dice was sent.
I mean, people are throwing $20 bills in, like after the dice are out and about to be in the air, saying $20.06 and throwing a bill at a dealer. They honor it every time. I mean, they buy in the middle of the rolls I don't think they know that you can buy in, before the come out roll. I don't even think that's an option for them. But they're rude to one another. Like, don't players actively cheering against, pass line players? I mean, they're mean
that just
to
wouldn't
dealers.
Be fun for me, I don't think.
It's such a completely different experience than what you see in Vegas or even any other small town, around. It's just players are just miserable, and it takes away from the whole experience for me. That being the case, because the gambling's just okay. There's nothing significantly better. They don't pay triple on the field. There are no feature bets. They take the vig up front. So there's a lot of things that are actually working against them. The dealers were better this trip.
That's good.
Which is good because they set such a low threshold last time. It was kind of hard to be worse. But they were better this trip. They were slightly more competent. But they almost work against against themselves, Josh, when they're doing their thing. I've never seen this before, but at Encore Boston Harbor, the box person actively works, actively deals.
That's what you said, yeah.
She be capping bets and placing buy lammers on stuff and pushing checks out.
Really working, right?
And the stick would put the dice in the middle of the table in between rolls, and she would literally take her hands and push them to a player to get them moving. I've never seen this shit before in my life. It was crazy. But their biggest issue was they were trying to have this ridiculously fast game, obviously, but they weren't skilled enough to do it. They would not allow dealers to pay, like base dealers. They couldn't get bets paid off, and they're already sending the dice to the other side of the table. You're throwing, like I waited for a come-out roll to buy in. Asked for a marker. They finally get it approved and all that stuff. We're in between. They start to push the checks out, and before they even get anywhere near sending me the checks, they sent the dice. I mean, they're just like, no, keep it moving. Got to keep it moving. They do not stop for anything other than their mistakes that are inevitable.
And that's different from what we talked about before, which is, if you have great dealers on a packed hot table, great dealers, the table can still flow really, dice can move really fast, but you need to have a good crew. You've got to have a good crew.
Yeah, and that they have some okay crews now, but yeah, they're not up to that level. So between the players being, really gruff and just kind of rude in the way they present themselves, and then the dealers struggling from time to time and trying to have this fast game that's not going well, it gets messy. I don't know. It just, the whole experience is just, it's not great. But the thing that really kills it for me is like, this was my local property and I was going to go there a lot more, you earn 0 tier credits playing at that place. Trying to get 3,000 tier credits for that weekend. If this was Wynn, I know I can earn 3,000 tier credits in 3 hours. Right. It's not that big of a deal. You'll hit it the first day and you're done. Right. At Encore Boston Harbor, you could have, a 4-hour session playing an average bet of 450 or so. And when you do that, you may earn 250 tier credits for that session, which is crazy. Insane. Just absolutely insane. And even worse, on the slot side, when I was trying to just milk some comps on the slot side, and just grind away, right? Just grind away. I knew, like, my final session, I needed like 900 points more. And it was Saturday night. I was leaving first thing Sunday. So I sat down at a slot machine that I thought would have some pretty good payback, an older style machine, that typically gives you a little bit more back on each spin, so I didn't lose too terribly much. And I earned, like, the screen literally tells you how many tier credits you've earned. Yeah. And it said you had earned 1,250 points. I was like, good.
Chris
I covered everything I need.
He made it to black,
I was like, Josh, I made it. And then I wait a minute and I look on my app, and instead of 1,250 points, it gave me 625.
That's crazy.
I don't understand. There's nothing like on a sign anywhere. And this is not specific to one machine. This was all machines. Whatever you were earning tier credit wise, they were giving you half, which is insane. That's $10 playthrough for 1 tier credit, effectively, is what it is. Right. That's video poker levels. And I'm not going to play video poker because of how slow and boring it is. But I don't know. It just, you can't earn it on the tables. You can't easily earn it on a slot machine. So for anybody that's really trying to build status up, that place is just, it's off the radar from that perspective.
Now, a couple of things I want to kind of wrap up your trip with. So this leads into Saturday morning. So that Chris got there on Friday. Saturday morning, Chris couldn't find an open table, which is one of the reasons I would not want to go, honestly, is I don't want to go down in the morning and not have a table. I'm there to play craps.
6 a.m.
I'd be irritated if I couldn't find a table. You couldn't find a table, so you sat down on a slot machine, and then magic happened.
It did. I was very disappointed. I got my coffee. There's a Dunkin' Donuts there, which I actually really like, so I could go get a nice latte to start my day. And they had one craps table open, and there was literally, Josh, 16 people on it, 8 on both sides, and there was people standing behind the table. And as the day went on, that continued. I think at 10 o'clock, they opened a second table. Same thing. Packed to the brim, couldn't get on. Noon, same thing. They opened a third table. They got way too many players and not enough tables open. I guess, supply and demand in this case is way out of balance. Right. But that being said, I had to do something. So I started.
We're there to gamble.
I got to gamble. I can only eat so much food.
That's right.
So I roamed around to a couple slot machines, and I was just kind of breaking even, which was good, earning a couple points. Played a little Heidi for you. Nothing great came from
for
it.
me.
And I sat down at some slot machine, which I still don't exactly know what it is. I think it's like a Liberty Bell Progressive or something. It's one of those ones where if you get like 9 coins on the screen or something, it starts a feature to fill the screen with coins, and whatever's on the coins, you win, which is okay, great, perfect. Right. So I got a bonus game. It was going okay. I'm getting like, oh, here's $2 and $4 and $2. And, I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm going to win $40. Right. Well, on the last drop down, it dropped like major jackpot. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, how much is that? And I looked up, and it was like $8,000. And I was like, that can't be right. I'm not getting that, right? And I think I even texted you, Josh, I think I won $8,000.
You did. He sent me a text. It was, Chris, I think it was $9,000. And you said, I think I won a jackpot.
I don't know. I was like, I think I won $9,000.
You may have said, I think I even, you may have said, maybe. I maybe won a jackpot.
I wasn't 100% sure, honestly, Josh. I'm not a big slot player. I saw it on there and I was like, that can't be right. There's no way. And then next thing you know, the bonus ends and it pops up on the screen. And it's like, jackpot, $9,000 or whatever it was. It's some huge number. By far the biggest slot win I've had because I don't play slots very often.
Right.
And I even got to test my whole, how much do you tip a slot attendant on a jackpot win? I don't
know if you want to share that or not, but
I'm trying to remember what I actually gave. No,
You texted me. I can say it if you don't remember.
Okay, how much was it? Because I don't even remember.
You tipped $40.
That sounds right.
Okay.
And I was perfectly happy with that. The guy was fairly nice. He brought the cash, and so he's like, here you go. I think $40 was perfectly fine. We've had this discussion. I know there are plenty of people that would have tipped $200 or $300. Right. And I know there are plenty of people that would have given $0. And I'm still a firm believer that the jackpot amount doesn't matter. It's just the act of him having to walk back and grab the cash and hand it to me. And it was even lazier than that, Josh, because I think the first 5,000 he had in a bundle and he didn't even break the bundle down. He just gave me the bundle. So that's just laziness. I was going to give him an extra $20, but he couldn't count it out,
That's so cool.
So that was really cool. It's by far the biggest I'd hit. So that helped, especially since I got my, butt kicked the first day and didn't really have, anything going that morning yet. So I was way down.
Right.
So that put me very positive, and I ended up finishing very positive for the trip as a result, mostly of that jackpot.
So 2 more things I wanted to kind of wrap up your trip with. One, you had a good session that you said later that day where you actually had your 10 up higher than you've ever had it before on a craps table.
If I remember correctly, I think it hit 3,200.
Is that right? I know at one point you said 2,000, so it's very possible you hit it again. And
it hit, and I went to 32. I don't know why I was hitting so many 10s, but I'm not complaining about it. But I did follow my whole weekend there, Josh. I've been using my new system.
Right.
I double every time. And then
on 4 and 10.
As soon as, on 4 and 10, double my bet every time until I hit 1,600 and it hit. And then I got a little scared, and I did go to 2,000.
You went
a little scared when I got to 1,600. So I jumped to 2,000 from 16 to pockets a little bit, because you always say you should, take one back once in a while.
I don't think it's the wrong.
And I was like, well, a $3,200 payout, I should, take a chunk of that at least. So I did jump from 16 to 2,000, but then 2,000 hit again, so I jumped to 32, which felt reasonable. It didn't hit at that point, but that was by far the biggest I've had a number up.
I've never had one that high. I don't think.
And I was trying to step back in between rolls and text Josh like, oh my God, it said 60, it said 2,000.
At one point, yeah, exactly.
That's great. That was really exciting. All the other, place bets got up, well over 500 or 600 as well, because the roll lasted for so long. There was no feature bet, so there was nothing to do there. Although I'm sure we hit the feature. Yeah, he never had any 7s on this come outs between points. So I'm sure we probably hit the feature 3-4 times. But it's not there, so it doesn't matter. But it was a great roll. Got to see numbers I hadn't seen in a long time, and I was a net winner at craps for the weekend and a very big slot winner.
And you topped it all off by finally on that Saturday night making your win black status.
I did. I played way too many slots, way more than I wanted to play to get it, but I knew I was never going to hit it on the tables. There was just no way. But the tier credit earning rates, I was going to have to play it through slots. But I did hit black status, which is great. Now Josh can stop giving me shit about not being able to go through that door in between Tower Suites and the Resort Tower, as if he's something super special. And I've even confirmed from my trip this weekend to Win Vegas that I do have a Tower Suites room, so I can finally see what the amazingness of that whole tower is. And I'll even see Joyce in there sometime, I can see Joyce over there sometime.
That's true. You can.
She'll wave at me in the Tower Suites entrance, because that's where we belong now.
But it's congratulations. It's as we talked about before, and as we posted on the article, and I talked about my journey to black status at Win. As a table games player at the levels we play, it is not easy to reach black status at Win. I mean, it takes, even at the rate we play, it takes 70 to 100 hours of solid craps play to get there, and that's in Vegas. it's a, so I'm kind of, for good or bad, I don't know if it's good, but I'm kind of proud that I made it and proud that you made it.
I've heard stuff from people, on Twitter and stuff, actually giving you a hard time that it's like, oh, if you hit that level, it just means you're a degenerate and you play too much, you lose too much money.
Right.
And those people always have a tendency to frustrate me. I mean, everybody has a hobby in life. I mean, for some people it's playing golf or tennis, or they like to travel, or they like to drink and smoke. I mean, whatever it is, everybody's got something that they do to fill their time and to use their spare money. I think for us, gambling is what fills that niche. That's what we find entertaining. Mm-hmm. We have the income to support it, so we're going to do it. And quite frankly, the same thing I tell everybody is if you're going to play as much as we do, then you need to get yourself in a players club that's going to support you as a player and give back. And by doing that and hitting those levels and, having a good host that's taking care of you, then when you come out, you aren't going to have any expenses. You can go to the spa and you get that taken care of. You can go to, take advantage of the master classes that exist through Wynn, which are really cool, unique experiences that you can't do anywhere else. If you're a golf player, you can go play golf for free, which is a pretty big value when it comes to Wynn. I mean, there's so many things, and then there's always, like why I'm going this weekend. There's a $1,500 gift card just sitting there waiting for me to come. Now, granted, they assume I'll lose more money than that, and they're probably 100% correct. But things like that, make it worth your while to hit certain levels so that you can get these, promotions available to you. So if you're going to play someplace that's going to treat you well. I've been a Caesars 7-star before, and there was no value there. Right. I mean, they would give you like airfare, reimbursement, certain amounts, and then you get your dinner for your birthday and all that stuff. But there was no real value to being a 7-star in my eyes. And I'm sure there are current 7-stars listening right now, whether it's Mike and Mark or whoever it is, say, no, it's really valuable. That's just not been my experience. But I have found that Wynn statuses do bring some decent value to you.
Yep, I agree. So I think we're probably, I know we talked a lot about casino credit and Chris's trip. So we'll wrap up with just a few closing things, right, Chris? And then we'll call this episode a day.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little long if we're not careful here, although I have no clue how far we actually are into this episode because we were talking beforehand when I hit record.
That's true.
But I think we're around the hour mark right now. So it's probably a good time to wrap it up. So I'll save any questions that we had for listeners to next episode. I'm sorry we didn't get to them, but I don't like these things to go too long. So beyond that, it does it gets old. I understand. We're not that exciting. But thank you to everyone, though, that placed an order through our new web store. We have seen all the love and positive feedback on Twitter, and believe me, we really do appreciate it. It's great to have you guys supporting us, and it's not the money. That side does not matter at all. But nothing makes me happier than waking up in the morning and seeing a message from somebody on Twitter or via email just saying, "Hey, I really love what you guys are doing. It's a great hour of my week." That is awesome. Thank you to all of you that do that. Please continue because it makes me feel like we're doing something good here. And we'll continue to do it as long as we possibly can. But as a special thank you, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, sorry, Chris. I was just going to echo that. It's we've got the new shirts out, and not to push our new merch, but it's really fun to see people getting, as I said, we're not making much money off this. It's really fun to know that people are enjoying what we're doing and supporting the podcast. And it's a kick to see someone in Las Vegas wearing one of our shirts, and it's really a lot of fun. And so we appreciate the support, both in that way and the questions that we're getting, the DMs, the activity on the forum. It's all, just we're delighted that people are enjoying the show. It's fun for us to do and appreciate that.
And we both mentioned it before. We both do have full-time jobs that eat up a lot of our time. This is definitely not it. We try to find as much balance as we can, to answer questions, that we get on Twitter, respond to emails that we get, and more importantly, to try to record things like this and work on new projects that we're doing for Crap Vegas. We're trying to find that balance as best as we can. But seeing some of those messages or waking up and seeing a photo of somebody wearing our shirt in a casino, that's absolutely awesome. It makes it all worthwhile, and it just pushes us to do more than we're even doing now. So for any of you that don't have a shirt or dice or anything like that you want to get from us, I am going to extend a new offer out for the next 2 weeks until the end of the month. You can save 11% at our web store by using promo code YO11.
Handy,
what do you think, Josh? Yeah, YO11.
Just don't make it 7%. We're good.
No, 11%, promo code YO11, and that is crapvegas.com/shop. You can get anything that you want to get on there. And if you haven't yet already, one thing that we really stink at doing is asking people to leave a review of our show and making sure they subscribe to everything. So please do leave a review. We do read every single one of them. Thank God they've all been really positive, because the first time I see a negative one, I'm going to be really upset.
We're going to cry.
But the more reviews that you guys leave for us, the more it raises us up the podcast charts, so more people can hear what we're doing, and hopefully we can get that out to as many people as we possibly can. So thank you for that in advance if you can.
Yep.
Other than that, make sure you subscribe, like, and review our YouTube channel. We have a lot of new content coming that way very shortly that we keep hinting at. We were talking for 20 minutes before we even got on here today about some of the upcoming things. And I think you already saw kind of a hint at what the initial 5 seconds of our videos is going to look like if you follow us on Twitter. I think I posted that last week just to give you a little hint. But beyond that, we're hoping to have some of our first original content things out there in about a month, somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks. We're still putting it together right now. Like we said, we're fairly busy people, so it's very time consuming trying to put YouTube videos together. More props to people like Vegas Introvert that do this a lot more frequently than we do. So I don't know how they knock things out as quick as they do. Because I'm trying to video edit and I've never edited a video in my life. So I'm like, oh, what do I click here? And I downloaded some program, Adobe Premiere, and I'm trying to figure it out as we go. And I have no clue what's going on. So it's been really fun. But we have some good stuff coming that way for you guys as well. Josh, anything else that we need to touch base on this week?
The only thing I wanted to mention, I meant to mention it last episode and forgot. Speaking of Vegas Introvert, it's good you brought him up. I was a guest on Vegas Introvert's YouTube channel, where and along with Mark from You Can Bet on That. So Mark and I were co-hosts or co-guests with Vegas Introvert as he interviewed the Annoyed Pit Boss, who wrote a book called Dealt: Stories from My Life on the Felt. And so Danny, Vegas Introvert, wanted a little help talking about table games, that kind of thing. So he asked Mark from You Can Bet on That and me to help him along in interviewing the Annoyed Pit Boss. So just wanted to plug that interview a little bit. It's on YouTube on Vegas Introvert's channel. And we had a great time doing it. It's always fun. And, Chris and I have talked about it before. You Can Bet on That. Mark and Dr. Mike are, heroes to us in this podcast journey. And so it's always fun to get a chance to talk with them, on a show like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will do my best, although I'm terrible at this, to put a link in the show notes to that interview. If I can remember to do that, it's going to be a completely different situation. But as of right now, I'm saying I will put a link to that interview in our show notes.
Works for me. I'm certainly not going to do it.
Well, that's 100% true. Okay, guys, Josh is going to be in Vegas in 2 weeks. I guess a week after this comes out. He'll be at ARIA for his Star Trek nerdy pew pew convention.
That's right.
God, I'll be glad when that is done, so we never have to talk about that again for another year.
Oh, I'll start talking about next year's already, right?
Oh, God. Yeah. No, they don't put the information out early, Josh. You're going to have to wait. And I will be in Vegas this weekend. When you hear this, I'll be getting back home, staying at Wynn, of course, for a couple days. So we'll see how that goes. But other than that, I think that's it for this week, guys. We really appreciate all of you listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Vegas, here we come.
Thanks for listening to the Crap Vegas podcast.
Have you ever been to Vegas?
Check out all our recent news and our Vegas trip calendar by visiting crapvegas.com.
See you in Vegas.